Thank you, Claire. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today for our webinar, Staying Ahead of the Fraudsters. I am Chris Wynne, the Fraud and Scam Prevention Manager here at Danske Bank. And this morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Catriona Still, who is the Head of Fraud Prevention and Trading at the Dedicated Card and Payment Crime Unit within the City of London Police. Thank you, Kat, for giving up your time this morning. You're very, very welcome to join us here. Today's webinar will take around 60 minutes, and we've built in some time for Q&A at the end. You're very welcome to submit a question using the chat function. Please be aware the chat function is open to everyone, so all your comments or questions, as well as your name, will be visible to everyone as well. So long as you're okay with that, we just want to draw your attention to that. We have muted all mics and turned off all cameras apart from ourselves. That's not because we don't want to see your smiling faces, it's just to keep any technical snafus to a minimum. But we are recording the slides, and we will be able to share a copy of that recording once the meeting or the session has taken place. So, without further ado, let's crack on and get stuck into the main crux of what we're here to talk about today. Probably doesn't come as much of a surprise, because if you've been on one of these before, this is a very similar stat to what I've talked about before. And it is calling out that fraud is the crime that you're most likely to be victim to in the UK. Now, that's not me from Danske Bank making up a figure and a stat just to scare you. It is the National Crime Agency who is calling that out. Now, that's based on reports made to police forces, mainly in England and Wales, because Scotland and Northern Ireland do it a wee bit differently. However, speaking to our peers in our local police forces, they would come to the same conclusion that it is an incredibly common crime, and it is one of the ones that gets reported the most. And that is quite a scary statistic, because it's also one of the crimes that has the least amount of policing pointed towards it in the UK, so they don't quite go hand in hand. And the one thing about fraud, and one of the unique elements of fraud, is that in most cases, for it to be actually successful and for the scammers and criminals to get what they're trying to get, it requires the active participation of the victim. And the reason that adds more of a challenge is fraud usually ends up with a financial loss of some description. They're after the money. That's what they want. Money can be recovered, money can be found, money can be recalled, money can maybe be reimbursed. But the impact that it has on the victim in terms of the psychological side of things, how they're left feeling after an event of fraud, is something that's much more difficult to patch over. And the amount is sometimes inconsequential, because it's still your sense of trust and your sense of your own ability to spot a scam. It can be called into question. And that's why prevention is absolutely better than the cure when it comes to fraud. And being on a session like this today will hopefully give you some takeaways to stop you from being the next victim. Because there's nothing you can do to stop yourself from being targeted, to be blunt. But there is things you can do to stop yourself from being the next victim. And that's what today's session is going to hopefully cover off. I want to talk a little bit about Northern Ireland and what fraud looks like in Northern Ireland. Now, the figures I'm going to talk through here come from the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau. They pull together all of the reports that go through report fraud, and indeed to all of the police forces across the UK, and really helpfully allow us to break it down into the different regions in the UK as well. Literally just updated before this call this morning, these are stats for a 13-month period from March 2025 through until March 2026. And in Northern Ireland alone, there was a reported £40.1 million lost to fraud. That's a lot of money for our wee country. That's made up of about just over 5,000 individual cases of fraud. And whenever you split that down then into personal losses for individuals and business losses, it's not quite 50-50, but 22.6 million for individuals and 17.5 million for businesses. And looking at those losses as well, if you just take a look at the very small number to the right of the loss figures, that gives you how many cases are related to that number of losses. So actually, if the average loss for a personal customer was about £4,700, but the average loss to a business is about £70,000. Obviously, the size of the prize for a criminal is much bigger from a business. You're not getting 70 grand from me, not in the month of Sundays, but from a business, that could be a very normal transaction value to go out the door. And I'm going to say something which probably will surprise you in many ways, but these figures are completely wrong. They are incorrect. They do not reflect the position that actually takes place in the UK or indeed in Northern Ireland. Now, the reason I'm saying that is, again, the NCA would estimate that only about 14% of fraud actually gets reported through to law enforcement through to report fraud. Now, as banks, we see a much higher reporting figure. It's likely between 70 to 80%. And we know from looking what losses we get reported to us that these figures don't align. I'm just one person from one bank in Northern Ireland. There are many others. And if I multiply up what we were seeing across the other banks, I know that figure is not right. So if we were to multiply that £40.1 million, the actual potential loss to fraud in Northern Ireland over the last 13 months could be closer to £286 million. We're a country of about 2 million people. That is a huge amount of money. That is taking away from the growth of this country, from economic growth, from companies growing, from individuals achieving their goals. It's a massive, massive impact. So the more we can do to prevent it, the better. And that's what, again, the purpose of today is. I want to just cover off a little piece that we hear very, very frequently. So we have conversations with customers and we try and find out what happened, why it happened. We try and find out what works well in terms of us telling people about fraud and scams and how we make our awareness activity and so on land better with them. And one thing we often hear is, I never thought it would happen to me. I thought I would spot it. I thought it would be more complicated. Sure, that's only happening to older, vulnerable people. That's only people in certain backgrounds and so on. And it couldn't be further from the truth. So in 2025, the average payment fraud victim in Danske Bank in Northern Ireland, the biggest and most reports of fraud that we got was from the ages of 20 to 39. It was not an older person. And when we look at vulnerabilities and so on, there's not a sway towards that. Yes, of course, the loss value for an older customer may be greater. That's driven by the fact they often have more money to lose. But actually the volume where most reports come from are from younger people. And why is that? Well, most fraud starts online. And who is online more than anybody else? Our younger population. So they're more exposed to the risks that fraud present. And thinking of this from a business perspective as well, and people in your business who have access to online channels, who do business payments, if they fall in that age category, they could be susceptible to the risks that are out there, to giving away information that could then lead to fraud taking place. And it doesn't matter what your educational background is, what your home life background is, there isn't an average fraud victim. We have reports of fraud from all age categories, from rocket scientists, from checkout operators, from teachers, from doctors, from nurses, from bank staff, quite frequently. So it doesn't really matter what you are. If you're caught in the wrong moment, you might be caught out. The old adage, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is, plays in fraud an awful lot, but it often gets very quickly forgotten about. So I just wanted to put a bit of context behind what an average fraud victim actually looks like. I want to give a wee bit more detail about one of the most common types of fraud that we see on a very regular basis. And I'm not going to say it's something we're seeing more of now, because we see it every single day, and we have done for years and years. And the underlying threat and issue is still the same. But impersonation fraud, which is where criminals pretend to be another organisation, that could be the bank, they might pretend to be Danske Bank, it could be law enforcement, it could be HMRC, might even be a friend or a family member. You could get a WhatsApp from someone saying they're your son or your daughter and their phone's broken and they need to lend some money, or it could come from your brother through Facebook Messenger. Unbeknownst to you, their Facebook account has been compromised and scammers are contacting you pretending to be them. But that's what an impersonation scam is. One person pretending to be another person, but the goal is to get you to send money, buy gift cards, a very common currency nowadays in fraud and scams, or indeed share personal or financial information to allow a scam to take place. And you'll see on the screen there a whole rake of different very recognizable brands. And the reason I've chosen all of those is because we've seen scams that have impersonated every single one of those over the last 18 months or so. And there's many more, I just couldn't fit them all into a nice shape. But there's lots and lots and lots of this going on every single day. Just this morning, we had a call from a business customer who got a phone call yesterday from the Danske Bank fraud team. And on that call, the scammer was able to give back a wee bit of information to the customer, which made them think, well, that must be the fraud team. But the scammer then asked for more information, which then allowed the fraud to take place, going back to the victim being an active participant in the fraud. So what feeds this? Where do they get the information from? How do they get those details to then go to that next stage? Well, smishing, which is text messages, being used for phishing attempts. It's a really common way for scammers to get this. Now, this is one example. It's a cost of living payment text that done the rounds last year. There's lots and lots of other versions of this, which could be from parcel delivery companies. It could be from HMRC. It could be from law enforcement. It could be from Curry's to say you've won a free kettle, click here to claim it. Lots of variations of it, but this is just one I wanted to bring to life a little bit more. So text message basically saying you're entitled to some free money, click on this link. Fantastic. Why would you not click on it? Well, if you do, it takes you to a website. And the website it takes you to, if you've ever been on a gov.uk website, looks very like a gov.uk website. It's telling you that you're due about £900, and to get your £900, it's asking you for some personal information. So keep in mind, when you got this text message, the scammer knew absolutely nothing about you. They literally sent it out scattergun to a large number of mobile numbers in the hope that someone's going to click on it. So I did. So you click on it, put in your details. So you're giving them your name, your address, your email address, your phone number, and that's the personal information section completed. They're saying you're due £900. Now they want to pay that to you. How do they do that? Well, they can ask you for your bank details being one, or they can ask you for your card details being another. In this case, they've went down the card details route for a good reason as well. So they're saying you're going to pay £1. That £1 will be refunded to you. It's just to verify that's your bank. If you put those details in, we'll get you your £900. So you key in your card details, and then the last screen you see there, it says enter a verification code. Now, if you've shopped online, we're probably conditioned to maybe enter a verification code, or perhaps we're conditioned to go to an app and swipe to approve a payment or something along those lines. So you sort of see this and think, okay, fair enough, I've got to enter a verification code to verify the £1 that I'm paying. However, in this example, this is the verification code, so to speak, that I got. It is not a verification code to approve a payment for £1. It is a code to say that I'm setting up Google Pay. Now, again, in the heat of the moment, you're looking at this, you're just paying attention to what's on the screen. You might not read the words in that text message, or indeed your phone might give you the option to very quickly copy that 6-digit code and just fire it into the verification code screen, and you might not pay attention at all. But actually what's happening here is this fraud event is trying to get your card details to allow the scammer to put your card onto their, in this case, Google device to set up Google Pay, where they can then take the phone, or indeed online, walk into a shop, tap the phone and purchase away. So by keying in the 6-digit code that's displayed there, that then has the scammer, or the scammer then has their card on your device for them to go off and do whatever spending they want with whatever funds are on the account. Another common tactic that comes in this as well would be, for example, you'll maybe get a message to approve a payment, and they'll tell you, oh, you're actually swiping to decline the payment or to block the payment as opposed to approving it. Never the case. If you're getting an approval code or an approval request, it is just that. It's approving funds leaving the account, never the other way around. But again, they will hoodwink you into thinking something different. And often what you've just seen there, that information gathering, it's not one and done. And what I mean by that is they might have got Google Pay, they might have done a bit of spending, maybe you've got the money back. They will know that you've clicked onto the fraud. They will know that you've reported to the bank, and they will know that you've got a new bank card. They might even try a transaction on the old card to see if it still works. So they wouldn't be hesitant then to maybe pick up the phone to you a week later, 2 weeks later, and say, hello, phoning from Danske Bank. Look, we know you had fraud a couple of weeks ago, but I hate to tell you, it looks like it's happening again. But don't worry, we're going to help you. And they might do that in lots of different ways, and they might maybe not even have done anything in the first time, and they'll just use this second time because they've got lots of information about you. All of a sudden, they know all your card details. They can maybe read you back the last 4 digits of your card, which you might think, who else would know that other than Danske Bank? Completely forgetting that a week or two ago, you've given them away somewhere else. Did you also know that the first 4 digits or the first 6 digits of your debit or credit card do identify who you bank with? So even if they never done a Google Pay, they could take the card number you've given them, put them into an open source website, which will tell the scammer who you bank with, when the card was, or where the card was issued in terms of what country, and if it's a debit or credit card. So immediately, if you think they know your name, your address, your email address, they know your full card details, and they know who you bank with, if it's a debit card or if it's a credit card. Put all that together, and that could make a very convincing scam call from someone pretending to be the bank to you. And that's what we see on a very regular basis. And in the world of business, not immune to that at all, but in the world of business, we often see another, this time genuine government.uk website being used to help scammers make scam calls. The Companies House website, for any company that's incorporated is an absolute treasure trove of information for scammers. They are able to get lots of information from Companies House, which any Tom, Dick, or Harry on the planet Earth can access, and it'll be able to tell them directors of companies, months and years of birth of directors, charges, if any charges are registered with companies, who registered the charge. Again, you could potentially find out who they bank with, for example, from Companies House. And we know scammers use Companies House a lot to research whenever they're targeting businesses. And that's just something to keep in mind. It's remembering how much information is available out there with very little effort to get. And I know Kat's going to cover some of that later on today. But on that impersonation side of things, I want to let you have a little listen to a call. Now, last year, July, August time, we had quite a few reports from our customers and businesses in particular saying they were getting phone calls. The person was claiming to be from Danske Bank. They think it was a scam. And it was 100% an attempted scam. One of our customers had recorded calls. They shared the call with us, and they're happy to let us use this for education purposes, which is fantastic because it really brings to life the risk that exists every single day. So I'll let you have a quick listen to the first part of this call.
Hello.
Hi, good morning, sir. I'm Valerie calling from Danske Bank. How are you today?
I'm good, you?
I'm good, thank you. The reason for my call, sir, we have a payment on hold, and I would need to verify it was yourself who tried to make payment before it can be processed.
Okay.
So just for security, can you confirm your name and postcode, please?
You phoned me. Where's the payment going through to?
It's just to pass security, sir. I can't discuss account without passing security. I just need to be sure it's the right person that I'm speaking to.
Yeah, well, you should have the details in the system to confirm who you should be speaking to, and
yes, I do,
on the
sir,
payment.
but for me to access the details on my computer, I need to pass security. I can't discuss anyone's account without passing security, as you would expect. I don't think you would want me to discuss the account with anyone else.
Yes, but you should have something through with the name of at least a contact name of who you should be contacting through to ask to verify the payments, which is what we've had in the past.
Yes, sir. But I just need you to verify who you are for our records. That's the security question that I'm being asked today, as a postcode and a name.
No, that's not how we have confirmed security with yourselves in the past.
Now, if you're in the room, I would ask you to put your hands up, but you're not. But hands up, who expects a scammer to be a softly spoken, young-sounding Scottish female? I think the answer to that question is nobody. That is not the typical profile of who we think will be calling us to scam us. Now, what Valerie would have wanted, and Valerie also called herself Paula in other calls that were made to our customers, Valerie would have asked you to eventually download AnyDesk, a piece of remote access software onto your computer. When you have AnyDesk installed, Valerie then wanted you to give remote access to your device to her, and when that remote access session was initiated, she then would have engineered you to go and log on to your online banking, at which point then she would have blanked out your screen and then attempted to make transactions. Valerie has no connection with Danske Bank whatsoever. She does not work for us. She absolutely does not work in my fraud team, and I wouldn't want her to work in my fraud team, but that is not what the anticipated scam call is. Now, our customer knew from the outset something wasn't right, and fair play. Fantastic to hear. I can't say the same for many other customers who got that same call, and would you blame them either? Valerie was not pushy. She was not aggressive. She was not sounding alarm bells going, my goodness, quickly do this or you're going to lose all your money. She was calm. She was cool. She was confident. She made the customer feel bad about not wanting to answer security questions. She could have quite easily ran off and created all sorts of fuss and so on just to bamboozle you into giving information away, which often does happen. They will try and create a sense of fear and a sense of alarm. But Valerie was more professional than that. And that's just to drive home the locality of where a lot of scams are actually taking place. Yes, of course, Kat will give you some fantastic information about other places outside of the UK, but these are well-organized gangs and organizations operating within the UK, targeting other people within the UK. And I'll have a wee listen, just a couple of others very quickly.
Good afternoon there, you're through to Joseph here at Danske. How can I help yourself today?
Is that Danske Bank?
That's correct. You're speaking with Timothy Rogers.
Hi, Timothy. I've just missed a call from this number.
Yeah, so I believe he would have called you on WhatsApp, I believe. Is that correct?
So I'm his advisor, so I don't have a personal relationship with Mr. Armstrong. No, I've been dealing with him for a little bit of time now.
So there's 3 other individuals, all claiming to work for Danske Bank, and not a single one of them does. But again, just have a think about the locality of where those calls are originating from. And they're also all very young sounding as well. Difficult to tell age, I know, but they do sound like very young individuals too. And trust me, I can't share the call because I maybe lost the rag with them at one point, but they're very, very, very persistent. No matter what you tell them, no matter how much, and even when you tell them you work for Danske Bank and you know they're a scammer, they will argue with you that they are not. So they just don't hang up the phone and think, uh-oh, the goose is cooked, I'm going to go away. They will actually keep going. So that's how good they are at what they do and how well coached they are. All they want is your information and your money, and they will do anything they can to get it. And before I hand over to Kat, I just want to finish on one point from my side of it for the moment. We often hear from our customers to say that my bank account was hacked, my email was hacked, my LinkedIn was hacked, my Facebook was hacked. And I can understand why there's a belief that that's maybe the case. In reality, those platforms, those systems are often not the things that are hacked. It is us that is being hacked. And when they do that, then they log in using information that we provide to them. And that goes back to, again, the victim is often the active participant in the fraud to make it successful. I'm going to hand over to Kat from the dedicated card and payment crime unit, who's going to talk you through the next session. So Kat, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Really appreciate that. I must admit, those voice calls, I remember you sharing that with me last year, and I listened to it. I'm really embarrassed to admit this. I listened, I was trying to work out who the fraudster was, because I was thinking it can't be the female. You know, genuinely, I don't know if you guys would know this, but the most trusted voice for call centre operatives in the UK is Scottish female. So I can see why the criminals are utilising that, because it just does make it sound so much more legitimate. And I will talk to you, as Chris said, a little bit more about some of the other scam call centres that we come across. So a very brief intro about myself. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name's Catriona Still, and I work at the Dedicated Card and Payment Crime Unit, which is a police unit nobody's ever heard of. We've been going for 24 years, but if you ask any of your police friends or anybody you know in policing or your local force, I can almost guarantee they've never heard of us. So we are a privately sponsored police unit. It's a bit odd, isn't it? Why do we do that? Because the reality is when we were set up, the banks across the UK were struggling when it came to getting their cases taken on by law enforcement. So in reality, they said, look, if we set up our own unit and pay for it, would you dedicate your resources to investigating these organised criminal gangs? Of course we would. And that's why the DCPCU was set up 24 years ago. So we are City of London Police and Metropolitan Police working together, which is very unusual. And also people like myself that are seconded from the financial institutions in the UK to work within the police unit to help the officers understand their cases, know what's going on and how to investigate them, because they can be quite complex. Certainly a lot of the fraud cases we deal with, we are going after the high level criminal gangs quite high up the chain. And so they are very, very, very skilled in their business models that they are running. We cover 3 areas. It's worth knowing this. We don't take our reports from members of the public or businesses directly. They would come through the bank. So Chris would identify, we call it linked series, lots of cases that come together with one commonality. And then we would look to investigate those criminal gangs responsible for it behind the scenes. So we don't take our cases directly from members of the public or businesses. We get them from the banks in the UK, obviously including Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, the whole shebang. So that means we are travelling around the country a lot, around the UK, and investigating the crimes. The key 3 things we deal with insider threat, where it's organised criminality. So that will be where criminals will infiltrate, try and get people, bad guys from the outside working within the banks. So we target that. Doesn't happen that often, but it has been found in the past. And we also investigate organised criminal gangs that might be responsible for infiltrating staff that are already within an organisation. We also deal with something called social engineering and authorised push payments. This is where the criminals will get you, as Chris has already spoken about, to do the transaction yourself. And again, we're looking at the organised criminal gangs responsible for that. And Chris, you mentioned there about the purchase frauds. I love that you shared those stats, because people think this is only affecting a certain demographic. It's really not, as you've demonstrated there. And I'm really pleased that you shared that, because when it comes to education, people think it's never going to happen to me. You know, this is not something that is going to impact me. I've seen it. I know all the different scams. That is just not ever going to impact me. And I can tell you now, something called situational vulnerability. That means no matter what you've got going on in your own life, that can impact your decision making at the time. And the criminals will try and catch you at the wrong time for you and the right time for them. Great example of that, a very good friend of mine. She's 44. She was running late, taking the kids to rugby. She'd got a text message in the daytime about a parcel, and she was due to have a parcel, right? So that was not unexpected. And she tried going through the business. It was bought online, couldn't find a way of contacting the business through phone, no live chat function. It's only £1. I'll just pay the £1. And as Chris demonstrated with the phones in the demonstration earlier, she paid the £1 fee for the parcel to be released, and of course provided all of her information. They identified which she banked with. They phoned her 5:15 p.m. when she's running late for rugby, got the teenagers in the back. Oh my gosh, I've got to be there in 5 minutes. Took that phone call. They put that urgency on her. We need your one-time passcode in order to stop any payments going out. £15,000 later, they'd stolen £15,000 off her. Now, she actually did a three-way call with me as it was live. So I could hear the criminal on the phone and I could hear my friend Louise. And again, oh my gosh, he was very, very convincing. And again, a young sounding voice, very British sounding accent. And at the time, I just thought, I don't know whether this is real or not. And I had to say to her, who phoned? Did he phone you or did you phone him? And I told her to hang up, and he swore at us and left. And so we knew it was a scam. And that was a 44-year-old female, just busy and got that phone call at the wrong time. So I do agree with Chris when it comes to situational vulnerability. It can get you at any time. You might be busy caring for older relatives. You might have an ill dog. You know, it can be literally anything. If you're caught at the wrong time for you and the right time for them, I believe there is a flavour of fraud that any one of us could be, caught at the wrong time. That tells you a little bit about our police unit. I don't think there's anything more. I just mentioned the UK Finance brand, actually, just so you're aware of who they are when you see this branding come up. UK Finance are the trade association for the UK, including Northern Ireland, when it comes to the banks all working together to try and mitigate against fraud. So we've got a whole team of people working over there trying to prevent fraud in the first place, working with government to bring in new changes. The reason I mention this, government's fraud strategy went out, I don't know, in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. And we have driven a lot of changes in that when it comes to online safety and trying to get some of the online platforms to take responsibility when it comes to fraud and scams with fake adverts, etc. So just so you know, that's who, if you ever see that branding, they're responsible for the Take 5 to Stop Fraud campaign. And I'm seconded from UK Finance into the police unit. Okie doke. So let's give you a little bit of an idea about some of the stats. I love that Chris brought in some that were more specific to your area. I think that is really, really important. These figures that you're going to see now are all in relation to what we see across the whole of the UK. Now, the important bit is down the bottom left-hand side. This is only 6-month period. So frustrating. We're 2 weeks off being able to give you the whole year, but I can't do that now. I would lose my job if I did. So I can only give you the first 6 months of last year. £629.3 million stolen, up by 3%, a small increase. But the good news is we've prevented £870 million of unauthorised fraud. What is unauthorised fraud? Unauthorised fraud is where the criminals are using your information. They're not getting you to do it, they're doing it themselves. So £870 million stopped. So around about 70 pence in every pound that's blocked. So the banks together are doing a great job at stopping it. That's still 30% getting through. And this is how much it's costing us. And as Chris said, what's really important here, this is only a small picture, isn't it? We don't have the whole picture of what this is actually costing. This is what the banks are telling us is being stolen in fraud. And then this is an interesting one, up 17% on the number of confirmed cases. So we're seeing those numbers rise. If I were to tell you what that was last year, just to give you a little bit of a comparison, I think, let me just check my stats on that. Yep, £1.17 billion stolen in the whole of 2024. So by the halfway point, well, you know, that is, if you take the 6 months to be the same, we're way over that. So that is slightly concerning. The good news is that banks, like I said, have prevented that £870 million, and that is 20% more than in the first half of 2024. So that's good news. Interestingly as well, 66% of those authorised payments started online. 17% started through the telecommunications networks. Now, if we were to look at businesses, we don't have all the business stats, but a Peter and Peters report, when I was doing my research into this, showed that 69% of business leaders are very or extremely concerned about the impact of fraud, as they report their businesses lost the equivalent. I don't like lost, had stolen. Let's go with that. Change the narrative. 7.4% of their annual revenue in the last year. Scams, 23%. Synthetic ID fraud, 23%, and now the leading causes of those losses, according to the survey of the UK businesses. So with the growing accessibility of the stolen data and advances of generative AI, which we'll talk a little bit about, synthetic fraud is the biggest driver of the fraud losses for telcos. Now that's telecom communication companies, 31%, financial services, 26%, and retail, 36%. So that was quite interesting. And 1 in 5 business leaders said that fraud losses are caused by account takeover, where fraudsters gain unauthorised access to online accounts, including banking, social media or email. So we'll cover a little bit more about that in a moment. So where do some of these calls come from? If I were to ask you that, you'd probably say a teenager in their bedroom, hoodie, behind a laptop. That's kind of the first image that comes to mind when we talk about who we think is responsible for these type of crimes. And that is the case. We do see a lot of cases like that within our police unit. But I also want to demonstrate that this is much bigger than that too. So this is an image of Mawadi Wadi. Now, this is KK Park in Myanmar. So the Mawadi area has become a notorious hub for cyber scams, with organised crime groups exploiting the ongoing instability in the country to run their extensive fraud operations. So looking at the left-hand side, February 2020, quite small. By 2025, look at the size and the scale of it. So this is organised criminality, scam call centres on another level. So those working within these scam call centres think they're genuinely applying for a job. So the advert says something like, we are looking for people aged 18 to 30 that have got computer skills and can speak very good English. In return, you will be provided with accommodation, food, etc. Come work for us. It's a really nice environment to work in. So a lot of people went to work within these scam call centres, but what went wrong was that the scam call centres, not that they knew that's what they were getting into, once they stepped over the river, there's a river that goes around the outside of these, and you see that on the image there. Once they're in, they couldn't get out. They had fraud targets to meet every day. Now, I don't know how much the value was, but I'm going to use an example of a fraud target of £10,000 a day. If you do not get £10,000 a day, you didn't get fed, you were tortured, electrocuted, and in some cases murdered. This is a completely different level. Now, this is being run by Chinese mafia gangs, organised crime on a very significant level. The governments across the UK are well aware of it because they've had people from all walks of life working within there. We've had Brits, we've had people from Australia, South Africa, loads of different countries where they've been travelling, they've identified a job opportunity, and then once they're in, they couldn't get out. And people were being noted down as missing people. It's just beyond horrific. Now, the governments have come together to try and target the organised criminal gangs. And as you'll see from this slide, you'll see that some of those kingpins have actually been sentenced to death. That was tail end of last year. I think it was September, October time. But this hasn't stopped it. It is still happening. We see call centres popping up all over the place. So this is not just in Cambodia and Myanmar. We had one not that long ago in the Isle of Man. If you were to have a Google search on that, Isle of Man call centre closed down, where they were identified as being, and I happened to be in the Isle of Man doing some training on this, and the National Crime Agency and the US Secret Service were out there to make those arrests and to close that call centre down just a week later. Didn't even know it was happening on the Isle of Man. So this doesn't just happen in those countries where, you know, they've got political instability. It is happening around the world too. Okay, so why do criminals do what they do, and how do they manage to convince us to part with our money? Some of you may have come across this before if you've ever been to any kind of fraud webinars. They need three things. There's something called a fraud triangle. And this is where it was a guy called Donald Creasy. It was like a theory that he had, that you need a pressure, you need an opportunity, and you need rationalization in order to commit those crimes. And that was a triangle. And then I can't remember the name of the next person who came along. That's I've forgotten that. But they came along and said, actually, you need the capability to do it as well. Overlay that with technology, and those criminals are able to exploit weaknesses within our systems. So what I'm looking at here is thinking about your security controls within your business, because criminals will look for any opportunity. And if they have the capability to take advantage, they will. So I'm going to use a case study here where there was an employee working within a business in a finance team, and they were responsible for doing the finances and the invoices. Now, this individual, we are investigating within our police unit for stealing £1 million from that business. £1 million loss. Can you imagine that within your business? What would that do to your organisation? What was the pressure? Gambling debts, house debts. This individual had a gambling addiction, or has a gambling addiction, and they had a huge financial pressure on them. The rationalisation: when I win big, I'll be able to pay it all back. The business aren't going to lose. I am going to pay it back. I'm just borrowing it for now because I kind of need to try and win big so that I can pay it back. And oh my days, the opportunity was there because nobody was checking the bank names when it came to confirmation of payee, making a payment, and he was putting in a random business name with a fake invoice, but it was coming up and saying, well, that doesn't match. And he was saying, well, I know it doesn't match. That's okay. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. And then the money was going to his own bank account. So we were able to trace it all. So he had the pressure. He'd rationalised it to himself. He had the opportunity, working within the finance team, only one person doing the checks, nobody else checking it before it went through. Now, that is something you might want to consider when you look at the values. So bear that in mind. And then when it came to the capability, he had the knowledge of the systems, the processes, the procedures to exploit those weaknesses. He also didn't take a break from his work. So I know you will have heard that before. It is really good advice. If you can, try and put in a break to make sure all of your employees are taking a fixed period of time off. Recommendation is normally 2 weeks. People don't like it because they like to be able to use their time, when they want to. But there are good reasons why it's worth doing that, because a lot of these things get picked up when those people aren't able to kind of hide what they're up to. So this individual had all the understanding of the internal controls, what would be seen, what wouldn't. He had the awareness of the weaknesses in the controls that he was able to manipulate. So what other frauds are we seeing? I know Chris has already covered a bit about this, so I will cover it as well, but business impersonation fraud, bank impersonation fraud. Chris gave a really good example of all the different kind of brands. I talk a little bit about, you will see the Take 5 logo, Take 5 to stop fraud. If you can imagine, each one of those digits of my hand is an acronym. The cause of most fraud and scams: context, authority, urgency, scarcity, and emotion. The criminals will use the context, the here and now. It could be down to gas, it could be down to what's going on, political instability at the moment across the world. They will use the context of the here and now in order to target you. You're due, Chris showed this, you're due £900 back. This will be useful to you, but don't miss out. They will use authority, claiming to be from an authoritative organisation. They will use urgency. You must act now, because if you don't, all your money's going to be stolen. They will use scarcity. This comes in a lot on investment scams. Don't miss the opportunity of investing in this crypto product. This will yield you a return of 15%. You're not going to get that anywhere else. That's scarcity. And then they'll use emotion, C-A-U-S-E. With the emotion, they are trying to get you out of a logical, cold brain into a hot, heated brain that is illogical in thinking, that fight or flight mode. That's where the criminals want to get you. Because as soon as you go from that logical thinking of going, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would somebody be asking me to withdraw £100,000 and, whatever it might be? They want to get you into that fight or flight mode where they panic you. And so Chris mentioned that already. They will put the pressure on you. They will tell you that it's really urgent, and if you don't act now, etc., etc. They are piling on the pressure to make you do something that you shouldn't do. So that's where the Take 5 Stop Fraud campaign can be really good. So when it comes to the methods that they're using for impersonation fraud, they will pretend to be a legitimate business, as we've already mentioned, an organisation, company, to manipulate you into giving them money or personal information. So common methods they'll use, we've already covered this, so I'll cover it very quickly. Fake emails, texts that look identical to real company messages. So the logos, the language, the branding will look spot on. Spoofing. They may spoof the phone call where the caller ID showing on your device shows as your bank or shows as your utility company or your phone company. Very, very clever. So the criminals will say, hello, is that Mr. Alcock? I've got my name is Kat calling from Danske Bank. Before we go any further, you don't know who I am, so don't give me any information. I don't want to ask anything from you, but if you look on the back of your card, you'll see that the number showing on the display is phoning from Danske Bank or British Gas or whatever it might be, 3 Mobile. So they will use caller ID spoofs to make the telephone number on your device show like it is from the legitimate business. Very, very clever. They will use fake websites that copy a real company's design to steal your login or payment details. And also we see social media impersonation using fake accounts pretending to be brand customer supports. And as Chris mentioned, that is where we sometimes see the fake links being embedded into live chats. And you click on the live chat, and then that is actually downloading a remote access software onto your computer. What they're after, we know that they're after money, they're after your personal data, they're after your company data, they might be after intellectual property. So there's a lot of stuff that you guys hold that will be of huge benefit to those fraudsters. So ultimately, they will try and cash out as well on gift cards. I know that's been mentioned, wire transfers. There's a range of different things that they'll do. Invoice redirection, still see a lot of this happening right across businesses across the UK. Another example of this is a friend's dad who owned a refrigeration business in Wiltshire, and he received an invoice through saying he hadn't paid a bill. Was quite surprised because he thought he was on top of them. Had a look at it, it all looked legitimate. He'd seen these invoices from this company week in, week out. So he just he had a look at it, realised that there was outstanding amount owed to that business, and he paid it. What he didn't realise is the bank details they'd put on were different to the normal bank details that he would deal with that organisation. That put him out of business. That was really sad, actually, because he was at the time just looking to retire. So that was a really sad case that I kind of helped him with. Really awful, but the criminals were very, very good. And again, they made it all look so legitimate. So the main way the criminal is going to target you is social engineering over the phone or via text or via email. So it is all about trying to identify the fake text messages, the fake emails. Just bear in mind, I talked about caller ID spoofing. Bear in mind as well that they can spoof email addresses to make it look legitimate. But behind that, and if you hover over it, you'll see there's a different email address associated to it. I had one of these just last night from Disney Plus. Saying that I needed to update my banking details, and hovered over it and it came from 4539ZQ or something, at gmail.com. But I knew that wasn't going to be legitimate anyway. The other things we need to consider about are CEO fraud, business email compromise. So this is where a specific type of business impersonation scam targets employees within the company. Fraudster pretends to be the CEO or another senior exec, contacts an employee, usually within the finance or accounting teams, and asks them to pay urgent invoice bills, share sensitive information, etc. How it plays out, the fraudsters research your company website, LinkedIn, company's house. I know Chris covered that earlier. I can't tell you how easy it is for the fraudsters to get information on you and your business. It's not hard. They are very, very good. I had a guy that used to work on my team that worked in counter-terrorism, and he said, Kat, the truth is you don't need to have all the skills and all the tech in order to find this stuff out. People share it. They share it on social media. It's on Companies House. So much of this information is out there. They will create that fake email address that looks almost identical to the real CEO's email address or senior exec. And as I mentioned, they can spoof it to make it look exactly the same too. And then they'll send that really urgent private request to an employee. I need you to transfer £50,000, for example, to this account for a confidential deal. Again, they'll say that it's confidential, don't discuss it with anyone. Now, the employee not wanting to kind of question their boss will do so. So why does that work so well? I think in reality, people are naturally hesitate when it comes to questioning authority. People don't really like to. And if it's a senior leader within your organization, people do not want to go to them and ask them if that's what's really meant to happen. They will also kind of act on that urgency, and the secrecy prevents that employee from double checking everything. And to be honest, the emails look really, really good. They're very convincing. They're very professional. So it's kind of exploiting their trust, I guess. And, you know, that normal, you know, work mode that we're in. They're very, very good. The other thing I wanted to cover off, and I will just cover this off briefly because I want to make sure we've got some questions and answers. AI and deepfakes. I don't plan to spend a lot of time on this, but I do think it's really important that you know that this is happening. We took a phone call from one of the banks in the UK a few weeks ago where a business had transferred £1 million out to what they thought was a hospital, and they told us that they were on a Zoom call with the CEO of that hospital. It was a deep fake. It was completely fake. The whole video call that they were on was fake, i.e. the person speaking was fake. That had all been done via artificial intelligence and deepfake. So know that it is happening. Calls are being set up, and that doesn't mean that they're real. And we see this happening a lot with mergers as well. So just be extra cautious if you're going through any kind of merger. The criminals will identify companies that are being bought out and will target them specifically. But certainly when it comes to AI, just a quick one of what the most common types that we're seeing: AI generated phishing and spear phishing. So the Cybersecurity Breaches Survey 2025 found that 93% of businesses experiencing cybercrime reported phishing attacks as the most prevalent and disruptive type of breach or attack. So that's what they're seeing the most of. The AI makes it look very, very good. And when it comes to spear phishing, that's being more specific. So, for example, I would get an email that says, "Hi, Catriona, this is what we've got going on. We need you to do this, that, and the other." I've just mentioned deepfake voice and video fraud. So we're seeing, you know, AIs cloning voices, generating fake videos to impersonate senior members of companies. AI enhanced malware, ransomware, automated password attacks. So one of the easiest ways for attackers to gain access to the internal systems and confidential information is credential theft. Are you aware that you can go onto a site called Have I Been Pwned, PWNED, and see if your email details have been compromised? Chris showed an example of that. It's really worth doing. Put your work email in, put your personal one, and see whether your data is for sale, because there's a lot of breaches of companies that are legitimate that have had data breaches, and your data is for sale online. So know that that is happening. AI-powered social engineering, so publicly available data such as LinkedIn profiles, company websites, social media accounts of employees can be at risk of being targeted by AI-powered scams. How can you protect yourself from this? If you have the option to put in multi-factor authentication, it is definitely recommended. So the National Cybersecurity Centre recommend this. That's like a core protection, really, for your email accounts, for your cloud services, and for your remote access systems. So that kind of strengthens the authentication. If you can, put in multi-factor authentication. Other things to think about: train employees to recognise your AI-powered threats. Utilise AI-powered security system tools if you can. Improve your password hygiene. Please don't use really basic passwords. The criminals will get around those pretty quickly. So the normal recommendation is to use 3 random words, or use a password manager, and that should help you secure yourself from any kind of AI attacks. But just know it is happening. finally, I'm conscious of time. We want to make sure we are covering everything off. On the Take 5 to Stop Fraud website, which you can access for free, there's loads of collateral on there for businesses. So know that you can go on there and download posters, leaflets, if you want to put them in your business for your employees. There's loads of free collateral on there. And probably the final point, our DCPCU LinkedIn page. You can go on and see what we do. You can see some of the work that we do. You'll see us bashing through doors, trying to arrest the criminals, taking money off them, taking assets off them. So you can actually follow what we do and see the exciting work that we do within our police unit. And I think that is it from me, Chris. I know we'll want to cover off some key takeaways and some questions.
Thank you very much, Catriona. Greatly appreciated. And yes, reflecting a lot on everything you've said. Just when you mentioned CEO fraud, we had a recent attempt against actually colleagues of Danske Bank with emails purporting to come from our chief executive. Interestingly, however, every one of those emails went to our colleague's personal email address, not their work one, because the work one would be relatively easy to guess. How did that happen, you ask? Well, quite simply, the scammers pay for a premium LinkedIn profile, which allows them to see where people work, obviously, but then obviously their contact details without having to connect with them. So again, the research they do beforehand is really, really important. So just to bring the session to a close, we do have a couple of questions coming through. Some top tips, how to keep your business safe. Well, first of all, be skeptical. The Take 5 advice is stop. That's the first word. And there's lots of other scam advice out there, but that is also stop. Do not go any further and think before you act if you can. In relation to those payments that you're making, if you are making a payment on an invoice, if it's to a new payee or if it's a change of details to an existing payee, you need to take a moment to verify those account details are for who you intend to pay. You do that by contacting the intended beneficiary on contact details you know to be correct. You never ever reply to the email to go, is this okay? Because if it's a scam, of course they'll come back and go, yes, it is. Or no, it's not. Confirmation of payee, Kat mentioned it. It's a system that allows you to check the name on the beneficiary bank account you're sending the funds to. Is it super duper at preventing fraud? Honestly, no, because scammers will simply give you the actual name on the bank account the funds are going to. I'm looking at a list of 22 bank accounts which were received yesterday in a paper, I lie not. Our contact center, our back office center received a letter from one of our customers with 22 payments on it to 22 different bank accounts. It's a scam. It's not from our customer. And that's the correct names on all of those businesses. And they are businesses. There's out of the 22, there's 2 individuals and there's 20 limited companies. And COP will give a yes, it matches. So it's not as to what you need to think about is if, for example, I'm intending to pay Catriona Still, but Catriona says, oh, here, tell you what, pay Claire McGarry instead because she's my auntie sister's dog keeper. You might think, well, why am I doing that? And it's that stopping and thinking is the important part of it. Do use dual authorization for payments if you can. So don't have just one person approving it. Have a second, a great mitigant against unauthorized fraud, but also for authorized fraud. So long as both parties actually consider, what's this payment for? Oh, the boss needs you to pay for his hospital treatment. That's a bit weird. Maybe we should look into that a bit further. So it's the second person questioning the first person too. And then do limit your email addresses where you use them for business outside of business. As Catriona's mentioned, places have data breaches. Data breaches can then give scammers information about where you work. So if I use my Danske email address when I'm signing up for the Lady Gaga fan club, they had a data breach. My personal email address was compromised. They would have known I work for Danske Bank had I used that one at that point in time. Thankfully, I didn't. But I did get my pre-sale tickets. And if you're unsure who you're speaking to, if you don't know who it is, hang up. That is the advice we will give anyone. If you don't know, just hang up the phone if that call has come to you, and you can phone the organization that you think was calling you back. And you can do that in lots of different ways. You can go to the Genuine website, get the number there. You can go to the back of your debit or credit card, phone the number from that. You can phone 159. Many banks in the UK are part of the 159 service. You can call it and be asked to connect it to the bank. We wish more people would hang up on us. And I know that's a stupid thing to say, but we really would. People are so trusting when they say, oh, phone from Danske. How do you know you're Danske Bank? Well, oh, don't worry, it's fine. And then before you can get to justify it, they're happy enough to crack on and tell you everything they had, including what they had for breakfast that day. And the remote access piece, never, ever, ever allow remote access to your devices unless you know and trust the person you're speaking to. So I don't want everyone to all of a sudden pull down the shutters on their IT help desk when they're trying to fix a problem with Microsoft Outlook. But if you get a random call, the bank never needs access to your computer. We never want remote access to your computer, but scammers will make you think that we do, and they'll make you think we do under the guise it's to help you solve a problem. We don't. Trust me, many of our colleagues are not that technically capable to be able to do anything with remote access, but the scammers are. So moving on, we do have some questions. Some of them we've actually answered just in what we were talking about there, but we've also had some that were sent through beforehand. So very quickly, Kat, this actually one's probably best for you. Based on fraud case data over the last 12 to 18 months, what are the most common control failures you've observed, and what specific preventative controls could have stopped them?
One-time passcode requests.
Yep.
If I'm honest, I wish they were called one-time pins, because people are good at keeping their PIN number secure. But one-time passcode, people give out very freely. So my suggestion there would be not to give it out. Double check everything. I love the fact you said doubt all contact. I mean, that's normally something I say as well, Chris, because you just never know who you're speaking to. So certainly that's one of the biggest things, is not to hand out your one-time passcode willy-nilly, especially when it comes to banking data.
Yep, can't agree more. I'm sitting looking at one from eBay that says don't share this code. I've got an Amazon one that says don't share this code. I've got one from Tesco Bank which says please don't give away this code. A banking staff will never ask you for it. Our ones say that. There's a clue in what's there. Never ever give that away. Great. Question then here about credit risk perspective. What would the key areas of concern in terms of lookout in terms of fraud? And actually this links a bit to about identifying false documentation. Whenever we think about underwriting processes, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially with AI, is around document validation and income validation, because it's not very difficult to take a bank statement, to take a pay slip, fire it through Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever it happens to be, and create a very convincing looking version of something slightly different with a whole rake of different figures and numbers in it. There is lots of AI that is allowing scammers and criminals to do this, but there's also lots of AI tools out there to do the exact opposite and to find the issues and to call out what's wrong. So I think it's looking to see what technologies out there that can interrogate those proofs, looking for the alterations and so on as well on that one. Another question that we had was how do you deal with APP fraud? Or APP is authorized push payment fraud. That's the likes of the invoice redirection scams, the CEO frauds and so on that we had mentioned already. And I suppose I'll pick that one up. I mean, APP fraud is incredibly challenging to detect. The highest volume of cases comes from purchase scams, which has the lowest value overall when it comes to average fraud losses. It is the peripheral or needle in a haystack side of things, and trying to find it is difficult. When we do find it, engaging with customers and getting them to be open and honest about what they're doing and why they're doing it is very challenging. So if you get a phone call from your bank and they're asking questions about a payment that you're making, it's not because we're nosy, it's because we're trying to prevent fraud. And it's really important that we get honest and open answers on the back of that as well. We're not trying to be awkward. We just don't want you to lose any money. And there is now an authorised push payment reimbursement scheme that exists in the UK. It's been around since October 2024. And in certain circumstances, it does mean up to a certain value, funds may be reimbursed if you fall victim to this type of scam, which is a great position to be in. And it's right across all of the PSPs, the banks in the UK. Kat, this is one for you. Is it the amount of personal information available online or social media, or the bank's weak validation processes that make it easier for fraudsters to commit fraud?
I think I mentioned this one earlier. There is so much information out there on all of us. Like I said, the banks do a really good job at spotting it, actually, and they don't want the money being stolen either, because quite often it's coming off their bottom line too. So actually, financial institutions doing a pretty good job. Like I said, 70% they're blocking. Still means 30% getting through. And that is because most of the data is out there already. So as you said earlier, the criminals will use that to identify which bank you bank with. If you've given your card details over ever, if you've given your name or address details over to any company ever, which we all have, it's compromised. You don't know where it is, and it goes wider and wider and wider. And once it's gone, there's no control bringing it back. So yeah, it's all out there.
Yeah.
Criminals buy it. They spend about $20 per line of data to buy it.
It's a commodity, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. There was a question just about top 3 concerns. I think we've probably covered those already, so without going into detail, AI deepfakes, investment scams that come out of that, with the deepfake of Nigel Farage or Keir Starmer saying, here's a great investment, cyber attacks, which can cause all sorts of issues, especially from a data breach perspective. And then again, it's the unwillingness to listen to awareness, because I think it's never going to happen. I think that's getting more and more because people think scams are more complicated than they are. Very quickly and finally, Kat, this is one for you. Someone had asked, when you've been the victim of fraud, is there any authority who actually cares? And there was a
Oh,
comment about how a customer was a victim several years ago, reported it to Action Fraud, now called Report Fraud,
yeah.
and never heard from them.
Oh, this makes me so sad. There are a lot of people out there that care. Like, this has been my job for 20 years. I think it's so important. What I would say on that one is report fraud, as I mentioned earlier. You can feed it in. You might have one piece of the jigsaw puzzle, but with one piece, there's not a lot we can do. We need, if you've got a 1,000-piece jigsaw, we need, 700 pieces of that jigsaw to be able to find enough to put it together to get the picture. So I would always say report it. It doesn't mean they're going to be able to do anything with that one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. But with another 10, 20, 30, 40 pieces, it will just start to build that picture. And once we've got that, then we can go after the criminal gangs. So you might think nothing's happening. I can guarantee that that data is held. And if it matches to other data and we can build a picture, we will go after the criminal gangs. We save around about £35 million a year for the banking industry. And our arrests, we arrest around about 150 people a year just in our small unit alone. There's a lot of criminals being caught. There's a lot more out there to pick.
Very true. Thank you, Catriona. Well, thank you, everyone. That is the end of today's session. We do hope that you found it informative. As I said earlier, we will share a recording and a summary slide with you later today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much. Have a great day.